Good afternoon and welcome to CompanyRoots. Today we're interviewing Ariel Jaduszliwer, a venture capitalist and an impact investor who is currently the vice president of Pacific Community Ventures, a growth equity firm, impact investing firm. And he is also the managing partner at the venture capital firm Brainstorm Ventures.
Mr. Jaduszliwer is also a Kaufman Fellow and mentor, and he briefly led the United Nations Development Program on growing sustainable business initiatives in Venezuela. It is a privilege, and we are truly honored to interview you today. My name is Raul Kaworu. I'm a rising junior at St. Paul School, New Hampshire, and I'm the president of CompanyRoots.
My name is Sri Shafti, and I'm a rising freshman at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm from Hometown, New Jersey, and I'm the founder of CompanyRoots. The first question that we always like to ask our interviewers is, what are your roots and how do they help you in shaping your ideas and becoming the person you are today?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. I'm happy to participate. So my family is from Argentina. My parents fled there in the 1970s for political reasons. So I have dual citizenship. I myself was born in New York City. I was raised there by my mom. And then we moved to Los Angeles when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, both of which were atheists, kind of super progressive liberals, really instilled a strong sense of social justice in me. And they also really valued education. I attended public schools my entire life. I grew up around a diverse group of friends, many of which were first generation Americans like me, some of which unfortunately ended up incarcerated. So I really got, kind of broad experience being around different types of folks while growing up.
Yeah. So for viewers who might not know too much about your work, can you briefly explain some of what you do?
Sure. So I mean, at a high level, I do a few things. So I run a venture capital firm named Brainstorm Ventures that invests in early stage technology startups, primarily in the US, but also in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as you guys mentioned, I also help run Pacific Community Ventures growth equity impact investment firm. It's our third and our most recent fund. It's fully invested. So right now we're really just managing our last few remaining portfolio companies there.
Yeah.
And then separately, slight tangent, my partner and I also started to develop real estate products in Barcelona,
Yeah.
which we can talk a little bit more if you guys are interested later.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say lastly, something that's important to me is I serve on the board of a nonprofit called Defy Ventures, which provides entrepreneurial training to people in prison and people that were formerly incarcerated.
Yeah. And I guess that kind of touches your background as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So actually one of your businesses is Palo Moxo, which is the real estate project in Barcelona. So
Mm-hmm.
what brought you to this space and how do you forecast your involvement with them in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, I never would have envisioned owning or co-owning a palace in Barcelona or anywhere really for that matter. Basically, what happened is my business partner, his family moved to Barcelona, so he started spending a lot of time there. And while there, he identified he's a master kind of networker, has a great business mind, and he identified some unmet needs in the real estate marketplace there. So we ended up kind of devising a mixed use concept, shopping around for the right property, and ended up identifying Palau Mosho. We raised money from investors, which was really difficult. It wasn't an easy feat, given that local banks in Spain, after wasting a ton of our time, were not willing to lend to us. And also, this was in 2017. There was a lot of political unrest resulting from the Catalonian independence referendum there. So that freaked out a lot of potential investors. But we eventually ended up raising the capital we needed. We acquired Palau Mosho off market. It was a good deal. It's an 18th century palace that's in the Gothic quarter, so right in the kind of old center of Barcelona.
Mm-hmm.
It had belonged to the same family for I don't know how many generations. It was being underutilized, and it really fit the kind of product we were trying to create. So now, it's under renovation. We've pre-sold about 2/3 of the space. It's going great. It's de-risked. And I think in executing that project, we really gained a lot of credibility locally there in Barcelona. So we do want to create a couple of other unique real estate products in Barcelona, and now with a larger group of partners that we've kind of developed over the last few years. But COVID's put a temporary hold on that, so it's kind of it's frozen for the time being. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
we think we'll get back to that shortly.
Right.
Awesome.
And
Yeah.
so what you do is do you bring different businesses and like areas to that one castle and work with them there?
No, so with the castle, it's a mixed use product in the sense that there's retail, there's a couple of retail spaces on the street level, and then there will be a handful of kind of luxury residences on the top floors, and then there's a middle space which is almost like a palace within the palace, which that's the area we're toying with. But we're thinking about different things, such as event spaces that kind of fit the new normal. um, our take on a members social club gathering space,
Yeah.
a nice venue to be able to broadcast to a larger audience via the internet. So we're kind of working through that right now.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
In
Um,
in Homedale, we have this space called Bell Works. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Mm.
So it's where, I don't know if you heard of Bell Laboratories. It's
Yeah.
like the place where the telephone and everything, and even before
Bell
atomic.
Labs, yes.
Yeah. So they renovated the whole area. They spent a lot of money and a lot of time, and now it's like a business hub, a startup area. And so that's why Homedale is starting to get traction again in the
Interesting.
community.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, just briefly, the two new products we were kind of working on and thinking of creating in Barcelona. One is really around the co-living space for the tech ecosystem that's really been developing in Barcelona. So that would kind of go full circle with our other work as kind of tech and venture investors. And then the other product is more of a hospitality place, so it's a little bit different, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So how were you able to grow your career from its early stages to where you are now? And what were also some of your initial interests when growing and scaling out your career?
Yeah, so I mean, I've had a pretty non-linear career path, to say the least. My parents never worked in the private sector. They never owned shares of stock or even their own home, for that matter.
Yeah.
So basically, that's to say that I had zero familiarity with the business world until after college. I majored in industrial engineering at UC Berkeley because I was good at math. I was good at science. I had heard that engineering jobs paid good salaries right out of the gate. And it also seemed like industrial engineering in particular had the broadest set of applications in the real world. So this is, before computer science really took off.
Yeah.
And then after college, I worked at Intel for a few years. And while I held pretty interesting and high visibility positions there, for considering my age, I realized that I didn't really want to spend my entire career going up the corporate ladder in Silicon Valley or elsewhere. So I kind of figured out that business school, followed by a few years in strategy consulting, would be the best way to open doors, get good experience, all while preserving option value, which at the time was very important to me. And it's sort of a reoccurring theme in my early career decision making. Even with Intel, I left out that, one of the main reasons I joined Intel is that they had a program that they accepted me into called the Rotation Engineering Program, where you got to spend your first year rotating through different groups of your choosing before you committed to a more permanent group to place in. So anything that kind of gave me broader experiences and kind of exposed me to more was very appealing during those years. Anyway, so after getting my MBA and working briefly, as you guys said, for the UNDP's Growing Sustainable Business Initiative in Venezuela, I joined the Bridgespan Group. They're Bain & Company's nonprofit and public sector consulting arm. I learned a lot there. I really love the people, the big societal and environmental problems that we were helping our clients address, such as the Gates Foundation. But what I didn't like, or what wasn't a good fit for me, was the nature of the work itself, in terms of the workflow, the kind of hierarchical micromanagement structure that consulting firms have, and just being 100% client facing and focused on client deliverables all the time. It wasn't really for me. So, while I was there, I realized that, I had been exposed to it a little bit at Intel, more so in business school. And I kind of figured out that venture capital or private equity investing would be a much better fit for me. So I decided to focus on firms that were impact investment firms, right? Because of my background, kind of crossing that line between impact, nonprofit, and the for-profit space, or firms that were investing in Latin America. Because obviously I'm a native Spanish speaker. I understood the region. I was passionate about the region. I thought that would give me some sort of competitive edge, etc. So I ended up joining PCV's investment team. And then as luck would have it, one of the managing partners, the one who's now my business partner, had previously co-founded Brainstorm Ventures. And so him and I, we worked closely for many years at PCV, and ultimately decided to raise Brainstorm's second fund together to continue investing both in the US and Mexico. So, everything sort of worked out in the sense that now I've gotten to do a lot of impact oriented work, and at the same time do work that's, really focused on Latin America as well. So
yeah. And what do you say the difference is between, starting off at a firm like PCV or even Brainstorm Ventures and, having more of a manager position?
In a manager position in the investment space?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the types of work is different, right? When you're more junior in an investment role, you're mostly focused on, I would say you're more focused on the top of the deal pipeline, like really trying to generate interesting deal flow and do a lot of the analysis of those deals, and less focused on, you're less likely to have a board seat at some of your portfolio companies. You're less likely to be thinking about the overall portfolio structure, or fundraising strategy and things of that sort. At Brainstorm, since it's really just me and my partner and some kind of supporting staff, but we don't have any other folks on our investment team, I do a little bit of everything, right? I do things that a managing partner does, but I also do what at a larger firm an analyst or associate would be doing.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been that much of a difference for me. But
yeah. So what were some of the primary overlaps you saw between the venture capital and impact investing field?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think so impact investment can occur in different stages, right? There could be impact investing at the venture capital stage, more at the growth equity, private equity stage. There could be impact investing debt financiers, or there could be impact investing kind of at the public equities mutual fund side, right?
Yeah.
I would say that, and there's VC firms out there that invest exclusively in early stage tech startups. So they're just like any other VC firm, but they hold themselves accountable to a positive societal impact in all of the companies they invest in. They believe are, creating public good.
Yeah.
But in general, I'd say that, VCs and impact investors are both, really focused on finding those extraordinary founders. They're both trying to identify scalable business models. And then they're both, most interested in companies that are addressing, large markets or large impact opportunities.
Yeah. So both Rahul and I are working as interns at the Community Reinvestment Fund, which is a debt-based CDFI, which is a community development financial institution. So how would you describe the pros and cons of debt capital versus equity capital making an impact?
Yeah. I mean, I've never explicitly made debt investments myself, just convertible note investments through both PCV and Brainstorm. That being said, I think debt allows you to support companies that perhaps aren't investable from an equity perspective, but they do have the ability to generate sufficient cash flow to service that debt. So it broadens the field of the types of companies that you can support in order to generate whatever the impact that your firm's trying to generate. Depending on the terms of the debt, I would say for the most part, you can probably recycle debt faster than equity, and thereby you can support more assuming it was like an evergreen fund, you can support more companies via debt than via equity, because as soon as company A pays back their debt over a 2-year period or what have you, you can reinvest that same capital back into the next company.
Yeah.
Whereas equity usually takes a lot longer to get to a liquidity event where you get your money back. Transaction costs are lower, right? I mean, a typical debt transaction is cheaper and easier to paper than an equity transaction. I think with equity investments, they're more of a long-term partnership between the investor and the founder. It's really important that incentives are aligned, and hopefully they are. Equity investment for the most part allows companies to reinvest its cash into the business, into scaling the company instead of paying back the investors. I think those are probably the main differences. But I think there's an important place for both, and the rise of impact-oriented debt it's been really critical to the industry over the last years.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So with regard to Pacific Community Ventures, you once said each portfolio company has a tremendous market potential and opportunity to change the world for the better. So what were some of your experiences and takeaways like in overseeing these portfolio organizations?
Yeah. So just real quick. So at PCV, what we did is, we invested in California-based companies that we felt were scalable. They were consumer companies, but that had inherently labor-intensive business models, which meant that they each had a significant brick and mortar component to their business.
Yeah.
And the idea was to invest in like-minded founders who valued all of their employees, including the hourly workers, and provided them, or were willing to provide them, with above par compensation, benefits, development opportunities, et cetera, right? And so then as the company scaled, it would inherently create more jobs for lower income communities, and they would be better jobs than the industry norm.
Yeah.
You would then, help improve the state of folks living in lower income communities. Our secret sauce was that for every investment we made, we created an equity set aside for all of the company's employees, including and most importantly, their hourly workers, as a condition of our investment. So, 3 to 5% of the company was set. It could be an option pool. There was different structures we used, but the hourly workers had access to that equity. So that way, in the event of an acquisition or an IPO or what have you, we would no longer retain control. We had no way of controlling whether the new buyers shipped all of the jobs to China or what have you. But what we did ensure was that all of those hourly workers that were working in California at least had that kind of wealth creation moment, which was, for some of our exits, which was very significant for them. So that's kind of what we did. I mean, I had the opportunity to sit on the boards of several of our companies, and it's a tough business. Brick and mortar companies tend to be less capital efficient than tech companies. And rarely do they reach the heights of tech companies in terms of their valuations at exit. So what that means is that in order for the model to work, you cannot have a lot of failures, right? Whereas in a tech VC fund, half your fund's portfolio companies can cease to exist, but as long as you have those few companies that really did well, the fund does well as a whole.
Yeah.
So it's a tough business. And there's less sources of capital. So even though we consider ourselves a growth equity fund, we were typically the first institutional type investor to invest in these companies, because there aren't really consumer product or retail VC firms, right? Because the risk reward doesn't make sense. So just access to capital was challenging for these companies.
Gotcha. And so for when you were trying to find these companies to invest in, I'm sure a lot of them wouldn't just think straight away, let's go to a growth equity firm and let's try to apply for something. So what would the outreach be like there?
Yeah, well, locally, it's pretty similar to Brainstorm. I mean, we were kind of one of the premier impact investment firms for a while. We were pretty early. Our first funds were in 2000, 2002.
Yeah.
So, people knew who we were. We were investing locally, so California. So it wasn't as hard to get, via the networks of our partners, to get, intros to pretty interesting companies that were, that would potentially be a good fit for us. And, speaking at conferences, PCV, we had an entire nonprofit organization that was sort of our sister parent organization that had, large outreach, particularly in the Bay Area. So, we were able to see a pretty healthy pipeline of deals.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also for people who are trying to go into the finance area, I would like to say, how would you recommend they start off at big firms that are doing a lot of impact investing, or smaller firms like Brainstorm Ventures where just an entry level position might also yield experience? What do you think the pros and cons of each are?
Yeah. So for example, somebody that wants to get into an impact investment role, is that what? Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult space to penetrate. Usually, you see people with several different backgrounds, right? There's folks that somehow were able to land at a small firm off the get, and hopefully that firm does a good job of developing talent from within and promoting from within, so that person can grow at that firm. A lot of people end up, even if they have kind of an impact oriented mindset, they end up working in in Wall Street, investment banking, maybe covering the sector that they're more interested in getting involved with from an impact perspective. A lot of people work in strategy consulting for a few years because
Yeah.
you get a lot of exposure, obviously, and you it's a really kind of rapid way to build your business acumen. A lot of people join startups, so they're on kind of the other side of the table, right? They found or join early stage startups and take on different operating roles at those startups, and then maybe after an MBA or what have you, or they end up joining one of the investors in that startup. So they end up joining the investment team of the startup. You see a lot of different paths. I think it's more about just developing the right skill sets, regardless of where you develop them, and
Yeah.
kind of demonstrating that passion for the impact. And it also just takes a little bit of luck and networking and getting the right introductions, unfortunately, and things of that sort.
Yeah. And so here's like an interesting take on that. So if you were to go and do a do-over as your younger self, and
Yeah.
maybe you don't go to Intel at the first part and you take it a different route, how do you think you would approach it with your retrospect?
Yeah, like if I wanted to end up in the same, so a couple of things at Intel. Funny enough, so Intel Capital is one of the largest corporate venture capital arms of any company, and they had offered me a position at Intel Capital, but this was during a prior downturn, and it was a rotation. It was temporary,
Yeah.
so I ended up turning it down to take a full-time placement in one of the other groups I had already rotated through, because it was more certain because of the kind of economic environment of the time. So that's one thing I regret. Like, I think having gotten that Intel Capital experience that early on in my career would have made things a lot easier. Because if you already have venture experience, it's much easier to land in venture.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, um, startup operating experience. If you can get interesting roles, either whether it be on kind of the product management side or on the partnerships business development side of an interesting startup, I think that's valuable, and that's an experience I never really had. Trying to think what else. Yeah, I mean, I think another one is, I don't really have any regrets, but I had to take a few computer science classes as part of my industrial engineering curriculum at Cal, and I hated it.
Yeah.
But looking back now, I mean, having taken a little bit more CS or minored in CS to just have a more fluid understanding of that side, the technical side, would probably be helpful.
Yeah.
That particularly for venture capital, not necessarily for impact investing, but yeah, I think those are probably the main things.
Okay.
Yeah. So, moving on to like a different side of things, what were some of your takeaways from being a Kaufman Fellow, and what work do you currently do as a mentor there?
Yeah, so I mean, Kaufman Fellows has been great. They have really strong programming. It's an excellent network of venture capitalists and also other folks that are in the venture ecosystem from all around the world. So for those of you know, it's sort of there's a 2-year structured program where you attend these modules 3 or 4 times a year. You meet with your classmates, which are other venture capitalists from around the world, as I mentioned. You get it. You have excellent speakers, working sessions, just different kind of classroom environments, field visits, things of that sort. And then after that program ends, you're kind of a Kaufman Fellow for life, and it's just a network that you can sort of tap into,
Yeah.
for your job. Um, I mean, I think it's particularly useful for people that either they're investors at smaller firms, such as myself, or they're potentially building their own firms, or they're in a ecosystem where there aren't a lot of other VC firms, because it gives people a peer network that perhaps they don't have at their own firm, because maybe they're the only associate or mid-level person at their firm.
Yeah.
Uh, it's sort of a safe space to bounce ideas off of people, and things of that sort. In terms of being a mentor, so every Kaufman Fellow has a mentor for the 2-year structured component of the program. I've had a couple of mentees so far. One I have right now, she's currently going through the program. And I mostly serve as a kind of a sounding board and just a resource for them for, whatever they want to talk to. It's not very structured, but it's, I'm just like another person that, can help them, as they advance in their career.
Yeah.
Right. So when you became a fellow, did you meet a lot of people both involved in the venture capital and impact investing field?
Yeah. So, I don't know the exact numbers, but let's just pretend, my class of fellows was like 40 people. And of those 40, I would say at least 5 were in kind of impact oriented roles, if not a few more. And that I wouldn't be surprised if that number has grown. So yeah, impact investing is they're represented and, welcome to join Kaufman Fellows just as much as any other type of investor.
Yeah. So you graduated from the Wharton School at UPenn, and
Mm-hmm.
you did that with an MBA in finance and strategic and entrepreneurial management. So I'll be attending there next year for my undergraduate studies. Um, how? So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach rather than asking you about your education there. What weird experiences at UPenn kind of helped you change your education?
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations on going to UPenn. That's great. Weird experiences. Trying to think.
With professors, classmates, clubs, maybe?
Yeah. So, well, one thing that's funny is so some of the classes, it's a mix of MBA students, undergrads, and it's funny to see that for the most part the undergrads outperform the MBA students. So it's not that surprising, but I was witness to that several times.
Yeah.
So things I got involved with, so the that might seem weird to somebody who's not familiar with business school. I participated in they have global immersion programs,
Mm-hmm.
which are like a month during the summer. I chose in different regions of the world, so I chose Southeast Asia, and it was like amazing. It's just like a month-long trip, all planned for you. You're staying at these fancy hotels. Meet with you really get to know the local ecosystem in the different countries of the region that you're going to.
Yeah.
With local business leaders, political leaders, and it's also a good chance to bond with your classmates that maybe you didn't know during the year. So that was one experience that was amazing. I was part of they have a program that you have to apply to. There's only a few people in it, but it's sort of I forget the name of it, but it's a nonprofit board program where they place Wharton students in non-voting board member roles at various local area nonprofits. So you get exposure to what it's like to be a board member at a nonprofit at a pretty junior kind of stage in your career. So that was really that was amazing. Trying to think what else. I mean, in terms of classes, the weirdest thing I did was, and it's not weird, but it's just I think there was one other Wharton student that did it. So I took a non-Wharton class at UPenn on race in America with Michael Eric Dyson.
Okay.
He was a professor there. He's on CNN all the time. He's written a number of books. He's sort of a Cornell West type social critic and very intelligent professor. So that was amazing. That was like an amazing experience. That was very different from my normal day-to-day at Wharton.
Yeah.
I took a macroeconomics class with Jeremy Siegel, who's another kind of semi-celebrity professor. I found that very challenging. I didn't really have a foundation in macroeconomics before going to Wharton, and the class was at a pretty high level. It was I think intended more for people that potentially worked in various roles at Wall Street where they were kind of used to that way of thinking. So that was interesting. Trying to think weird. there's a few parties that that Wharton throws, like that they're kind of famous for, that are kind of, I guess, weird to somebody from the outside, where people dress up and things of that sort. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Was there like a specific teacher or professor, like a club that helped you and impacted you the most?
Well, teachers, there wasn't like one particular teacher that I connected with more than any others. In terms of clubs, um, as I had mentioned, my goal was to do strategy and consulting for a couple of years following business school. So I joined the consulting club. So they had various industry clubs for people, like, there was a traders club for people that wanted to become traders on Wall Street, things of that sort. And they're very practical. So the consulting club, I would say the most important thing it did was it prepared us for the kind of infamous case interviews that consulting firms give to candidates. So that was important. I was a member of Wamba and Walasa, which were kind of the Hispanic and Latin American clubs at Wharton. So that was kind of good bonding with folks. I think those are probably the main ones.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all of that. I'm going to try to definitely make my experience there a little bit less than normal, not go down the same routes that everyone's going to.
Yeah. One thing I will say is it's been amazing to see from the time I was at Wharton to until now, like how many more students and how much more focus there is more on the kind of impact investment side. When I was there, it just wasn't really a thing. I was probably one of the few people from my class, if I might have been the only one that ended up in an impact investing role. Now I know it's something that's very popular, and I get reached out to all the time by other Wharton alum or current Wharton students. So that's been nice. Right. And I think the curriculum has kind of changed around that and provided more content and programming around impact investing.
Yeah, and that was a big reason why I kind of chose it to apply there for.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So the last question that we always ask is, what advice would you give to the current generation of high school and college students that would like to start the process of making an impact on society? And how do you recommend they start that process?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first off that you guys are way ahead of the game, and I'm sure that your CompanyRoots community is as well. I mean, if you're already passionate about a particular issue or sector, then I would just say, learn as much as you can about it, start something in that space, or join an organization that's already, kind of active in that space. And by organization, I mean, nonprofit, company, whatever it may be. If you're still a few steps away, then I would, kind of what we discussed earlier, I would strategize as to what skills or experiences you can acquire in the interim that will best position you to get involved and make a difference, right? I would say, yeah, I mean, for folks that, you don't really know what you want to do yet, or, where you want to focus your career, kind of like I would say, try to get involved with things that you find interesting or important. Just generally speaking, think about what types of education, work, and even volunteer opportunities can both play off of your strengths, but at the same time strengthen areas that you think are important, but where you feel weaker. You don't need to land that dream job right off the bat. It's just trying to create a plan to how to land there, right? And things change. Like rarely does anybody in high school end up in the same role, 10 years later that they envisioned for themselves while they were in high school. But I think it's still good to kind of go through the mental exercise of thinking about what you want to do and kind of planning your steps accordingly to get there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you for the interview today. It was very high energy, and I liked what I heard a lot.
Yeah, thank you for letting us interview you.
I appreciate it. Good luck.